Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. We hope and we pray that everyone is doing well today, inshaAllah ta'ala. To proceed, this will be part 2 of the story of the man who we call Mu'min al-Fir'aun, the believer in the family of Pharaoh, who had multiple da'wah discussions with his family. Of course, why is this relevant to us? Number one, the arguments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recorded in the Quran are obviously valuable because Allah recorded them in the Quran, which means that Allah is teaching us through this individual how to give da'wah, number one. Number two, this person is giving da'wah to his own family members. And a lot of times this is relevant to us because there are many of us who are converts themselves. There are many of us who have co-workers, maybe even family as well, that are still non-Muslim. And in learning from his experience, we can try to adopt the same arguments, inshaAllah ta'ala, the same points that he brings up, the same methods that he uses in his da'wah. Of course, da'wah itself at its core is very simple, right? You're calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're trying to get people to leave all these other deities that they worship. In our modern day and age, it's not necessarily idols that are made out of stone and wood and gold and silver that people worship, but rather they worship different types of idols, whether they're celebrities, whether they worship fame, whether they worship money, materialism, consumerism, all these other isms that are out there that people have taken as idols. And of course, the worst among these is where people worship their own desires. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protects us and that He helps us and that He removes any form of shirk from all of our hearts, inshaAllah ta'ala. Because of this, the story, like I said, is very relevant. So we talked in the first part about multiple points. There was a point that I remembered after the fact that we brought up a question and we did not answer it. And that is the similarity between the believer, Mu'min al-Fir'aun, the believer of the family of Pharaoh, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. So, one of his first arguments that we mentioned last week was where the believer of the family of Pharaoh tells his people, أَتَقْتُلُونَ رَجُلًا أَن يَقُولَ رَبِّيَ اللَّهِ. Are you going to kill someone whose only quote-unquote mistake is that he says, my Lord is Allah, meaning you're going to kill him because he has a different religion, because he has a different faith? That's not an excuse to kill someone, right? And as Muslims, we believe that this is true as well. So he's asking them a rebuking question. Are you going to kill someone because he says, my Lord is Allah? Now, this same phrase was said by Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu to the disbelievers of Quraysh when they really became adamant about hurting the Prophet ﷺ and about abusing him and tormenting him and torturing him as well. This of course happened after the death of Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, because while Abu Talib was alive, nobody could lay a finger on the Prophet ﷺ. It was only after Abu Talib died that the disbelievers of Quraysh, especially the higher ups, really stepped up their torment because they figured, khalas, he has no protector. Even though protection came down to his next of kin, which is Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab himself was a disbeliever and he despised the Prophet ﷺ. Yet, because of his slight allegiance to his blood, he in the beginning was a little adamant that nobody lay a finger, but then after this he started to ignore it more and more and more, and this is where they became more bolder and bolder as the days and months went by. So this is obviously the late Meccan period, and at one point some of them wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ in broad daylight. They said, I'm going to kill him, I don't care who knows, whatever's going to happen, let it happen, whatever. I'm just going to get rid of this guy once and for all so that we're kind of done with all of the things that he's saying. We're done with this guy. Basically, he's like, I'm going to rid you guys of the burden of Muhammad ﷺ and his call. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the one who came to protect the Prophet ﷺ, and he admonishes his people and he says, are you going to kill a man for only saying, my Lord is Allah? أَتَقْتُلُونَ رَجُلًا أَن يَقُولَ رَبِّيَ اللَّهِ. Abu Bakr said it out loud to them, rebuked them, and basically said, look, if you're going to do something, we're going to do, you know what I mean, we're going to step up, me and my clan, etc., etc. He stood up to them. Because at the time when the person said it, nobody was really saying anything, as if they were going to go along with it. And because of this, there are many Sahaba later on who said, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq for the Muslims is similar in status to this believer of the family of Pharaoh to Bani Israel, to the Jews and the followers of Musa alayhi salam. Why? Because he stood up for Musa when Pharaoh wanted to kill him, and Abu Bakr stood up for the Prophet ﷺ when Abu Jahl and others wanted to kill him as well. Yet, there's a slight distinction. I believe it was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu who said that they are similar except that Abu Bakr is better. Why? Because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq professed from day one publicly that he is a believer, where the believer of the family of Pharaoh did not profess his belief until the very end. Now, of course, he has his excuse. Like we said before, he wanted to bring his people in to kind of step them through the process of developing their belief. And perhaps he's excused in this, meaning it's not a fault, it's not a sin necessarily for the believer of the family of Pharaoh. Yet, because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was public from day one, unashamed, unafraid, etc., they said that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq has in fact a higher status. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, of course. It's not necessarily a competition, but we're just trying to show the exemplary status of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. May Allah be pleased with him and pleased with all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and allow us to walk in their footsteps and to emulate them in our own lives, inshaAllah ta'ala. So, going back to the verses, we had left off at the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a verse that is in between the story, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically saying how despising it is to Allah, meaning how much Allah hates it when people argue about the verses of Allah without any proper knowledge. And this is, of course, a problem. And then, of course, then the verses continue after this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ يَا هَامَانُ ابْنِ لِي صَرْحًا لَعَلِّي أَبْلُغُ الْأَسْبَابِ. Pharaoh said to his top commander, top chief person, Haman, I want you to build me sarh. Sarh is a tower, so that لَعَلِّي أَبْلُغُ الْأَسْبَابِ, so that I can attain the asbab, the ways, right? And he leaves it ambiguous here, al-asbab. Now, for us reading this, we don't know what al-asbab is, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows this. So this is where the Quran has a spot where it is mujmal, and then after this it becomes mufassal. So in one place it's very general, and then after this it becomes actually detailed. So in this case, the general is al-asbab, and a person might say, okay, I know linguistically asbab means ways, or reasons, or causes. The causes of what? The reasons of what? The ways of what? And the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies. And of course, it's at perhaps the tongue of Pharaoh. This usage of language is used to attract and to get people to ask questions. What is this? What does he want? And this is why there are some mufassirin who explained it, I don't want to say superficially, but they explained it linguistically. And then there are some mufassirin who actually delved into it deeper, and they analyzed the psychology of Pharaoh, why he was doing this. So let's look at this for a little bit, because if Allah is mentioning it, obviously it's very relevant to the story, and it actually gives us a glimpse into why Pharaoh did not believe in Musa. And this is subhanAllah, I think very relevant to us, because when we give da'wah, a lot of times it is an exercise of psychology, meaning when you're talking to someone, you cannot talk to them without knowing how they think, knowing what they're feeling, knowing where they're coming from, etc., so that we can actually be able to talk to them, convince them, you know what I mean, do all these other things. And so in this case, Pharaoh is actually giving us a glimpse into his thinking. Allah is giving us a glimpse into Pharaoh's thinking. But he's giving it away himself because he's the one who's talking here. He says, أَسْبَابَ السَّمَاوَاتِ فَأَطَّلِعَ إِلَى إِلَهِ مُوسَى وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّهُ كَاذِبًا. So he's telling Haman the asbab. So then he clarifies, it's asbab as-samawat. You know, the ways of the heavens. And he wants to get closer to Allah. So first off, this shows that Pharaoh believes that Allah is in the heavens. Allah is above. And we believe this. Ahlul Sunnah Jama'ah, our belief is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above us. Okay? Even Pharaoh understood this. So he wants to build a tower. He wants to go up there. And he wants to as if be alone and be close to Allah. Now, why does he want to do this? He says, فَأَطَّلِعَ إِلَى إِلَهِ مُوسَى. So he tells Haman, I want to see if I can look and gaze upon the God of Musa. So obviously Haman is like, are you serious? Haman might assume in his mind, and we could easily deduct this, Haman is thinking, wait, does that mean that you, Pharaoh, believe him? You believe that he's truthful? So this is why immediately Pharaoh clarifies this. He says, وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّهُ كَاذِبًا, I think that he's a liar. So he's reassuring Haman, he's like, I don't think he's truthful. And so Pharaoh is trying to tell Haman, I'm doing this to debunk the idea that there is a God up there. Because remember, after this is when Pharaoh starts to declare himself to be a God. But there's a deeper reason. Why does he say asbab? Why does he say the reasons? One of the Mufassirin, Tahir ibn Ashur, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy upon him, he says an amazing thing. He says, back in those days, when the prophets would worship and the righteous people would worship, a lot of times they would seclude themselves for worship. They would go to a place solitary, usually in the mountains, as if the elevation has some sort of relevance in that regards to the spirituality, being closer to Allah, etc., etc. And they would, at those places, communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why, like Musa alayhi salam, when he went to the mountain, he talked to Allah azza wa jal. Our own Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was in the mountain, in the cave, etc., when he received his first revelation. There is a relevance here in at least that culture and his mindset. Of course, as Muslims, now that revelation is finished and we have the Quran with us, it doesn't matter where you are in the whole world. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he says, جُعِلَتْ لِلْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. The whole earth has been made for me as a masjid, a place where I can pray, and even as a purification. You don't have to go to the mountains to worship, is what I'm trying to say. So, Pharaoh, though, as Tahir ibn Ashur points out, was jealous of Musa receiving revelation and not him. It's not that he did not actually believe that Musa was not a prophet. It was that Pharaoh himself looked at Musa and he says, he belittled him when he first came back and says, you're the one who God picked as a prophet? You're a nobody. You don't have, asawir from dhahab. He says, you don't have the gold arm, the arm, whatever the things that they would wear, to show dominionship and kingdom and what. They're not bracelets necessarily, but they're larger than that. And he says, you're not even eloquent. You're not this, etc., etc. He's like, you're the one. Meaning, he was as if belittling Musa. But of course, we know that when people belittle others, it's actually because they're jealous of something that person has. In this case, Pharaoh was jealous that Musa alayhi salam was chosen as a prophet and not him, because they had in some of the legends, that the Pharaohs were the descendants of the gods, etc., that they had connections and they had all these other things. And so he was, at least according to his cultural upbringing and his own mindset, more deserving of prophethood than Musa alayhi salam. This is, of course, a main reason why many people reject the prophets that are sent to them. Many of Bani Israel rejected our own Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because he was not of their lineage, he was of an Arab lineage. And they belittled that. They said, no, we're not going to follow you simply because of lineage. Racism, complete xenophobia in rejecting the Prophet. Knowing that he is a Prophet, but I'm not going to believe him, I'm not going to follow him because it's this guy. This is constant throughout history. Pharaoh here is doing the same thing. He's saying, I'm not going to follow Musa because it's Musa, he's from Bani Israel. I am more deserving. And this is why he wanted to go up to see if he could get the asbab of nubuwah, of wahi. He wanted to get the causes, the ways of receiving revelation. He thought that the closer you are to God, the more deserving you are of revelation. Of course, he's correct in the spiritual sense, but incorrect in the physical sense, because the physical sense doesn't actually matter as much. What matters is that spiritual closeness, and obviously Musa alayhi salam is completely deserving. He's one of the greatest prophets to walk this earth, alayhi salam. Pharaoh doesn't recognize this. That's why Pharaoh wanted to see if he could get closer to Allah. Now he's telling Haman, فَاطَّلِعَ إِلَهِ, I want to look upon Ilahi Musa. So he's probably even thinking that maybe he can argue his way into receiving revelation himself. Obviously, we know that this did not happen. Nothing happened. He didn't see anything, etc., etc. And this caused him even more defiance in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that more defiance is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says. وَزُيِّنَ لِفِرْعَوْنَ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ وَصُدَّ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ وَمَا كَيْدُ فِرْعَوْنَ إِلَّا فِي تَبَابٍ. He says, we made it beautiful to Pharaoh. We beautified for him his ill deeds. And subhanAllah, this happens a lot. People, when they do ill deeds and when they devise evil plans, it becomes beautiful in their own eyes. Zuyyina. And it's mabni al-majhul. It's an unknown perpetuator of who's making it look nice in their own eyes. But in fact, it's himself. If it's coming from him, he devised his plan. You know what I mean? I wanted to do this, and then it didn't happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَصُدَّ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ, and he was blocked from the path because he's undeserving of it. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then reminds us that the plotting of Pharaoh is in nothing but loss, tabab. وَمَا كَيْد, and here he uses kaid. So the overtly plotting and planning and conspiring of Pharaoh is only going to end up in loss. This was active conspiring against Musa alayhi salam, against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trying to get some sort of benefit for himself. He brought his people, they built him something, it didn't happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us here a rule, that the conspiring of the people against Islam, against faith, against the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always end up in loss. Tabab is the same word that's used in tabbat yada, meaning destroyed. It will end up only in destruction. Okay? Next verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns back to the believer of the family of Pharaoh and what he was saying to his people. وَقَالَ الَّذِي آمَنَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُونِ أَهْدِكُمْ سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ. And the one who believed, he told his people, O my people, follow me, أهدكم, I will guide you, سبيل الرشاد. He's using the word سبيل الرشاد because Pharaoh, just in the page before this, is using this. وَمَا أُرِيكُمْ إِلَّا مَا أَرَى وَمَا أَهْدِكُمْ إِلَّا سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ. Pharaoh himself is saying, look, I'm just showing you what I see, and I'm only trying to guide you guys. سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ, the path of guidance. So here, the believer of the family of Pharaoh is using Pharaoh's own language against him. And he's trying to demonstrate how his way, his method, is actually correct guidance. That what Pharaoh was saying was not guidance. This is actually true guidance. This is actually what he's trying to talk about. So now he's using, and this is key in da'wah. So this is one of the things that we have to realize, is that we have to use phrases and words that people are familiar with that might be misplaced. You guys are using this incorrectly. Let me show you actually how this actually applies. This is better here. This is actually the way of guidance. So he's trying to correct a misconception, but using the phrase that they already know and recognize. And this is a very good da'wah technique. Okay? So then he says, Ya qawmi. Now he's going to explain what Sabil al-Rashad is. Remember he said, I'm going to guide you to Sabil al-Rashad, the path of guidance. Okay, what is that? Ya qawm, O my people. And he's saying, O my people, because he's one of them. He's from them. He's an Egyptian. He's from that same family. He's talking to his people now, and it seems as if he's probably no longer talking to Pharaoh that much. We don't know. Pharaoh's included in Ya Qawm, yes, for sure. But it seems like now he's really talking to people on individual levels, in public, whatever it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is quoting his words, not necessarily telling us what exactly is happening here, because the arguments, the points that he's bringing up are what's relevant, not the technical details. Remember, we said this a lot of times. Excuse me, the Quran itself is not, it does not busy itself with the technical details, because at the end of the day, they're irrelevant. What it does busy itself is with the core message, what's being meant, what's being said, for us to take away those lessons. And this is why the Quran is full of lessons. This is why I enjoy doing a lot of these things, so much so, using the Quranic language, because, wallah, at the end of the day, you cannot get better than this. Right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He teaches us the Quran and gives us deeper understanding of His book, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ya qawmi innama hadhihi al-hayat ad-dunya mata'. Says, oh my people, this life of ours, this life of the dunya is mata', it's just temporary enjoyment. Now he's appealing to a lot of the core issues of their understanding. Think about this. Egyptian society at the time was an affluent society, full of opulence, full of decadence, full of so many pleasures, riches, etc. I mean, they were basically the strongest civilization on earth. They had so many riches and wealth. Gold is everywhere. They're putting gold on everything. You know what I mean? They're literally like things that were used as wealth. Now they're like wearing it like clothes. There was so much gold in ancient Egypt. And of course they brought it from all over the world. It didn't actually originate in Egypt itself. Which tells us that they were enjoying a lot of these things. Yet here the believer of the family of Pharaoh is reminding them, all of this is temporary. And this is a human value. We all know this. He's reminding them of something that they already know. Remember, we talked about the switching between using logical things, then to emotional things, now to things that maybe are culturally relevant, things that they understand at a core. Using the dunya and reminding them about the temporary nature of this life is very effective. And the thing is, the ancient Egyptians, they did believe in an afterlife. This is why they would bury their kings with a lot of riches and wealth from this life in order for them to take it. And this is why there were grave robbers, etc., who would go in and take those riches afterwards and whatnot. So we know that they did have a concept, but that they wanted their riches and wealth to follow them in the hereafter. They didn't want it to be temporary. The reality is, it's all temporary. You leave it all behind. Grave robbers would come in and take it all away. You're not taking it with you. Even if you think that you're taking it with you, somebody's going to come and steal it because they know that it's there. And this happened with almost every ancient Egyptian tomb. Save for a few that now we have and are stored away in museums and whatnot. And so he's reminding them, this life is temporary. Then number 2, وَإِنَّ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ دَارُ الْقَرَارِ. And indeed, the hereafter, the afterlife is in fact the permanent place, the permanent house. That's where we're going to be forever. That's what we actually have to work on. Then he's reminding them of a concept. مَنْ عَمِلَ سَيِّئَةً فَلَا يُجْزَى إِلَّا مِثْلَهَا. Okay, whoever does a bad deed, he will only be held accountable accordingly. You did that one bad deed, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold you accountable to. وَمَنْ عَمِلَ حَسَنًا, he says, وَمَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. And whoever does righteous deeds, whoever does good, whether male or female. Obviously he's saying, why is he differentiating now? Because he's probably talking to his whole family now. Males and females, not just to Pharaoh. So it's very clear that he's talking to everybody that he can talk to. وَهُوَ مُؤْمِن, while he's a believer. Remember, you have to do righteous deeds while being a believer. Doing good but not believing is not enough. And we believe this. A lot of times, people, we ask this question a lot of times. A person is a philanthropic, he gives donations, etc., but they're not believers. What's going to happen? Well, the belief is necessary. And here, the Quran is very explicit about this, that we have to have the belief. There has to be sincerity in order for the deed to actually be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِن فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ. They will enter Jannah. Meaning, remember, when he said sayyah, he doesn't say nar. When he said you do a bad deed, you get hellfire. No. He says you're going to get a similar thing to that bad deed. That's it. So there's no guarantee of hellfire. But doing good while being a believer, there is a guarantee of Jannah. And that's the beauty of Islam. Why? Because Allah is leaving the door of forgiveness still open. Even if you do a bad deed, the door of forgiveness is still open. It's not necessarily guaranteed that you're going to go to the hellfire. Here, Jannah is a guarantee if you do good while being a believer. And this is why sincerity as a condition is one of the best, is one of the most important things. If a person is doing good deeds without being sincere, they're not going to be accepted. فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ. They will enter Jannah. And then, remember, he's talking about the dunya before, so he's reminding them something that differentiates the afterlife with the dunya, which is يُرْزَقُونَ فِيهَا بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. They will be provided therein without any account. Meaning, there's no limit to how much Allah can give you in terms of good in Jannah. Jannah is limitless. You get so much, so much, so much. Meaning it's not 1 for 1. It's not even a 10 for 1 is the minimum. It's actually way more than this. You can't even count it. It's limitless. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us all Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. He's reminding His people of this, which makes it seem like they had some sort of inkling about how the afterlife works, but that they were still attached to the dunya. And he's reminding them of the temporary nature of the dunya. Then he says, وَقَالَ يَا قَوْمِ. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the waw, he says, and my people. Meaning this is another conversation. So this whole sequence that we just said was a conversation that he had with his people. Now there's another conversation because of the waw, the usage of the waw. He says, and my people. And this is perhaps the last conversation that he actually had with them, because of how he ends it. And inshallah ta'ala, after this we will wrap up and we will finish inshallah ta'ala. So he says, وَيَا قَوْمِ مَا لِي أَدْعُوكُمْ إِلَى النَّجَاةِ وَتَدْعُونَنِي إِلَى النَّارِ. And my people, why is it that I call you to your salvation and you call me to the fire? Now when he means salvation, he means both in this life and the next. Remember in the beginning, if you remember last lecture, he was warning them against what happened to the people of Nuh, what happened to the people of Ad, what happened to the people of Thamud, because they had recollections of what happened to those people, so they knew what happened. So he's telling them salvation, not only in the dunya from similar fates of what happened to those people, but true salvation is in the hereafter. And this is why he mentions what he's calling them to, meaning he says, and you call me to the fire, meaning if I'm saved from the fire, that's true salvation. In the dunya, a punishment, whatever happens to me in the dunya, it's not necessarily the true punishment. And being saved from something in the dunya, just to be thrown in the hellfire is not worth it. And a lot of people think this way. They think that, oh, as long as I'm living in the dunya, okay, whatever, and then in the hereafter I go to the no, that's not it. If you go to the hellfire in the hereafter, you're not actually saved. Even if you were saved from something in this life, true salvation is the hereafter. But here he leaves it vague, in the sense of salvation in general, meaning both in this life and in the next. Now he clarifies, تَدْعُونَنِي لِأَكْفُرَ بِاللَّهِ. You are calling me for me to disbelieve in Allah. وَأُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لِي بِهِ عِلْمٍ. And for me to call upon partners with him without any proper knowledge. And there's no knowledge. What are you saying? The shirk that you have, there is no knowledge, there's no proof that this is actually correct. He's giving them an argument that any time, especially when it comes to religion, we have to make sure that whatever it is that we do, it has to be based upon proper belief. It cannot be based upon anything else. He says, you're calling me to do shirk, وَأَنَا أَدْعُوكُمْ, and I am calling you now. So now he's very explicit that he's a believer. He's alluding through his da'wah to the fact that he actually believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, وَأَنَا أَدْعُوكُمْ إِلَى الْعَزِيزِ الْغَفَّارِ. And then I call you to Al-Aziz, the one of honor, the one of dignity, the powerful one, the one of power. Al-Aziz and Al-Ghaffar, the forgiving one. Why does he use these two names? These two names are very relevant to his situation, obviously. He's telling them Allah is the one who is powerful and dominant over all these other gods that you call upon, but he's also forgiving. Because if we just say Allah is powerful and then stop there, and Allah is of might and authority, a person might say, oh, well, someone like that, I don't know if he would forgive me. I don't know if he's loving. I don't know if he's merciful. But he's saying, no, he is forgiving. He is merciful. He is loving. That's the beauty of the Islamic conception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't just say, yeah, God is love, and then leave it at that. Or we don't just say, yeah, God is powerful, and leave it at that. We mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only those two, but Allah is even beyond those. There are so many names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why the Islamic conception of Allah is the best conception out of any religion out there, and you can go and study them and look at them. And you will realize this. And this is why the number one thing that attracts people to Islam is actually the pure, simple, not in that it's derogatory, no, it's simple that everybody can understand, yet it's pure and it's so complete that you have no, subhanAllah, inclination except to accept that this is actually what is the truth. And it's the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the way that he teaches us about God. لا جرم أن ما تدعون إليه ليس له دعوة في الدنيا ولا في الآخرة وأن مردنا إلى الله وأن المسرفين هم أصحاب النار. He says, لا جرم, there's no doubt. أنما, with that what you call me to, ليس له دعوة في الدنيا ولا في الآخرة. There's no da'wah for them, meaning they don't accept your prayers, not in this life or in the next. How does a person know if their prayers are accepted in the next? They don't. That's why he mentions the dunya. He's saying, whatever you guys are calling upon, they never answer your prayers. You guys know this. And he's mentioning that if you call upon Allah sincerely, Allah will answer your prayers. One of the ways that we know that Allah is true, that Islam is true, that our concept of Allah being ahad, that being one, being samad, being eternal, being all-powerful, completely independent, and that everything in existence is dependent upon Him, we know that this is true. He's saying one of the proofs is because of dua, because of prayer. That when you call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely, Allah answers your prayers. This is why every Muslim on the planet has at least one, if not multiple stories of cases where they made dua and subhanAllah out of nowhere, and sometimes miraculously, out of karam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being generous to them and giving them this, that He answers their prayers. I know so many people that have told me stories of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted their dua. He's using the concept of dua to prove the falsehood of the deities that they call upon. Now, a person might say, well, I have a Christian friend and he said, yeah, I was making dua to Jesus and he said that his prayer was accepted. Okay, what was the dua? What is it, something, was miraculous? Was it this? Now here's the thing, Allah actually could have accepted it, meaning even though they were calling upon something else, they might have been saying, the words God, etc. They were hoping in God, etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might have given it to them. This can happen. But here he's going, those usually though are exceptions. Here he's talking about the general rule is that whatever you're worshipping, they never answer. And if it happens, it might be just a coincidence, meaning it was already meant to happen, it had nothing to do with your prayer. This happens a lot. However, a believer will know that their dua on a regular basis is actually accepted. And if it's not accepted in this life, it's accepted in the hereafter. And we know that it will be accepted in the hereafter because it's accepted here. So he's using a concept of dua to actually establish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his concept, his conception of tawheed, etc., is actually correct. It says, وَأَنَّ مَرَدَّنَا إِلَى اللَّهِ, and you know that our return is to Allah anyways. Our return is to Him in the hereafter. It says, وَأَنَّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ هُمْ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ, and the people who, al-musrifin, the people who have exaggerated, they've gone, bounds, and they've done so many sins, they've done so much kufr, they are the ones who are going to be in the hellfire. So he's warning them of concepts that they also understand. Then he says, and this is the last sentence that he says, فَسَتَذْكُرُونَ مَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ, you will remember what I say to you. When? Meaning in the hereafter, on the day of judgment. It's as if they warned him not to say these things, and now he's like given up, because his words now are the words of a person who has reached a limit with them. And it seems that they threatened him with violence, yet the violence is never mentioned. I know this is clear here. There's no mention of violence towards him. But the fact that he's saying, you're going to remember what I'm telling you. By saying this, it's as if khalas, he's reached a point where on the day of judgment, you're going to remember all of this and you're going to see who's right and who's wrong. فَسَتَذْكُرُونَ مَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ. And a lot of times when you reach a point with somebody that you're debating with, you're arguing with, sometimes you will reach a point where you say, look, our judge at the end of the day is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have full trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will exonerate, the one who is upon the truth. This is what he's actually telling them. فَسَتَذْكُرُونَ مَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ. You will remember what I tell you. Not in this life, but in the hereafter. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. And I entrust my affairs to Allah. So here, now why is he saying I entrust my affairs to Allah? It could be like, okay, in general, etc. But it seems like this is where they threatened him with violence. This is where they threatened him with his life. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Anytime a person their life is under threat, they feel like they have no recourse. They've reached the limits of what they can do, not only in terms of da'wah, but in terms of everything in their life. You reach a limit, you did your best. Obviously before you should be relying upon Allah as well, but once you reach that point you say, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, and I entrust my affairs completely to Allah. And that's what he did. He said that word. And this is a word that's very beneficial for me and you and everybody else as well, to say on a regular basis, I entrust my affairs to Allah. It's part of a dua that actually we say at night. وَفَوَضْتُ أَمْرِي إِلَيْكَ. I entrusted all of my affairs to you. That dua meaning, right before a person goes to sleep, that's narrated in Sahih Bukhari. So he says, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Indeed Allah, He can see all of the affairs of His servants. He knows everything that's going on. He sees that. And he's reminding them of this as well. I'm entrusting my affairs to Allah, and Allah sees everything that's going on. Don't worry. Allah, then after this, His words are done. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to us what happens to him. فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا. Allah, and the fa here is natija, it's the result. Okay? He says, therefore, afterwards, Allah, فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا. Allah protected him from the evils of their conspiring. They conspired against him. They tried to kill him. They tried to hurt him. We don't know. Allah just mentions the conspiring. He doesn't actually mention the details of this. Why? This is a beautiful thing. And I want everybody to pay attention to this. The conspiring of the enemies of the believers, whether then or now, the Muslims, will always only affect the ones who conspire, and they will not affect the believer. And if they do affect the believer, whatever we see is evil, it's only a temporary, and it's a stepping stone to something better. And I say this because, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran the same word makr. Makr is the word for conspiring, secret conspiring, right? Covert conspiring. That they conspired to either kill the Prophet, or apprehend the Prophet, or expel him out of Mecca. They were only successful in this last one. They did not apprehend him, they did not kill him, they didn't even hurt him, but they expelled him out of Mecca. But even in expelling him out of Mecca, they set up their own demise. Allah revealed that verse after the Battle of Badr to show that they set it up. If they didn't expel him, the Battle of Badr would have never taken place and they wouldn't have been killed. People like Abu Jahl, like Umayyah, etc., all those big sanadid, the big honchos of Quraysh. through their conspiring, they set up their own demise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this concept now, that by conspiring against the believer, whatever they foresee that they got away with is actually only a stepping stone to their own demise. By expelling the Prophet ﷺ out of Mecca, that was the only thing that they were successful in. The Prophet ﷺ initially was kind of sad because he has to leave his house. But as soon as he got to Medina, it was nothing but good after good after good after good. Meaning a temporary setback, maybe, if you even want to say that. But it's actually good. This is why we start our calendar by counting the hijrah, because we now, in hindsight, view the hijrah as actually a good thing, not a bad thing. But at the time, they thought that, oh, at least he's out of Mecca. I mean, at least a part of our conspiracy is actually working. But in fact, their conspiracy only came back to haunt them. Even after expelling him out of Mecca, they set up the Battle of Badr as a trap. The Prophet ﷺ did not know that he was marching into an ambush. He thought that the caravan was going to be there. The caravan was nowhere to be there. And there's an army of 1,000 Quraysh fighters waiting for him. So they thought that even through their conspiring to get him there to the battlefield, they were going to be successful. We're outnumbering them. We have better weaponry. We're better prepared. All these things. And the Prophet ﷺ is only there with 300 of his companions. It wasn't even a big battle. They weren't ready for battle. But Allah demonstrates time and time again that whatever conspiring the enemy does, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it, and He protects His believers, and it will always come back to be good for the believers. This is why a believer should never actually follow the conspiracies, because they don't really matter. This is why here in these verses Allah didn't even mention what they conspired to do, because Allah is trying to tell us it doesn't really matter what they were conspiring to do. I protected them from it anyways. If we do our part, we be good believers, Allah will protect us from the conspiring of the conspiracies that are out there. And now there are so many around us. But a Quranic concept tells us the conspiracy doesn't matter. What matters is our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're doing your job. Here he did his job. He called them, he gave da'wah to them. They threatened him. He says, khalas, wa ufawwidu amri ila Allah. I reached a point, I'm entrusting my affair to Allah. Allah protected him. فَوَقَاهُ اللَّهُ سِيئَاتِ مَا مَكَرُوا وَحَاقَ بِآلِ فِرْعَوْنَ سُوءُ الْعَذَابِ. And the family of Pharaoh, حَاقَ بِهِمْ, it surrounded them from every source, the worst of punishment. Meaning they were surrounded by water and drowning. Then they were surrounded by the fire in the grave, and then they're going to be thrown in the fire in the hereafter. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after this, He says, النَّارُ يُعْرَضُونَ عَلَيْهَا غُدُوًّا وَعَشِيًّا. He says they're exposed to the fire, etc. in the grave. This is one of the most explicit verses about the punishment of the grave, etc. That's about the family of Pharaoh right after this. Meaning they're being punished in the grave now, even before in the hereafter, as a type of torment, before the actual punishment. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us and protects us. To summarize, a lot of these ideas, the believer of the family of Pharaoh, wants them to consider a few different things. Wants them to reflect upon the dunya, their life here. He wants them to reflect on the temporary nature of it. He wants them to reflect on the hereafter and concepts they already know about the hereafter. And then he's mentioning things like we said, وَمَا لِي أَدْعُوكُمْ. Why am I calling you to believe in Allah and you're calling me to the fire? Why am I calling you to save you guys and you're calling me to destroy us? And when he says why, وَمَا لِي أَدْعُوكُمْ, he wants them to reflect on his intention. And inshallah, this is the last point that we'll mention. Meaning his intention in doing all of this, all of that da'wah, he wants them to think about it. Because in his da'wah, he's not getting paid, right? He's not getting any benefit from them. He's not going to win support. There's no inherent benefit. And by them reflecting on that, they realize, yeah, okay, so why are you saying this? If you don't benefit from telling us all of these things, why are you telling us these things? One of the ways that we know if a person is sincere or not is by looking, what do they stand to gain by doing what it is that they do? And this is why all of the prophets, they never got paid for being prophets. They never made money off of that. And the Prophet ﷺ is explicit about this. And this is why even our Prophet went to the extent of saying, Sadaqah is haram for me. I don't want any of your charity. Charity is haram for me and my family members. Of course, nowadays we have people in power that they include their own family members because clearly they're in there to benefit themselves and to benefit their family members. Okay? Our Prophet ﷺ was the exact opposite of this. He's saying, I don't want any benefit, and my family members, they can't benefit either. To show the sincerity in what it is that they do. We're not doing this for fame, we're not doing this for money. We're doing this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now people have no choice but to think like, hey, wait a second, this is true. If you don't stand to gain, why are you doing this? So now they think, okay, why? So they have to listen to what he's saying to consider why he's saying it. And by doing so, this is a very good da'wah technique. Okay? To show, like, look, just consider what it is that I'm saying. But if I have something to gain, like if I'm a salesman, I'm coming to sell you something, obviously I have something to gain because I'm going to sell you something, I'm going to make money off of it. So I can tell you, yeah, this vacuum cleaner is the best, this iPad is the best, this whatever is the best, because I stand to gain. So obviously I'm going to say whatever it is in order for me to sell it. But if I stand nothing to gain from selling you something, and I'm telling you this is the best, you're going to consider, you're going to be like, yeah, this is why we trust reviews more so than we trust, other things. And of course, the review has to be from somebody who has nothing to gain. If I give somebody something for free and I tell you to review it, that's not fair. You know what I mean? Ethically, that's not correct. They have to disclose that, and then I would have to take that as a part of the equation. I'm like, yeah, well, this person is getting paid to tell me about this, so can I really trust them? And we look into that. Now, you can say it's unethical, it's ethical, there's debates in that. But here, the man is clearly telling them, look, I stand nothing. In fact, I'm going to get harmed by telling you this, and I'm still telling you this because I care. And that's what he wants them to know, and that's what they felt. This is why some of them, initially, they didn't necessarily go after him, but after a while they did, because they just rejected what he was saying. They were like, we don't want to accept it. And Pharaoh perhaps was the one who wanted to kill him, because initially he was objecting to Pharaoh wanting to kill Musa, alayhi salam. Whatever the conspiring was, remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protects us all and our families from the conspiring of our enemies. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us and assists us in our da'wah, that He makes us among those who are able to call to Allah sincerely, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He forgives us for our shortcomings and our sins, and allows us to walk in the footsteps of people like the believer of the family of Pharaoh, and in the footsteps of people like Abu Bakr Siddiq as well, inshaAllah ta'ala, and be among the emulators and the followers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khairan, subhanakallah wa hamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.